In any group, the person on the top consciously or unconsciously set the tone. If leaders are fearful, hesitant to take any risk, or overtly concerned for their ego and reputation, then this invariably filters its way through the entire group and makes effective action impossible. Complaining and arguing with people to the work hard has a counterproductive effect. You must adopt the opposite style. Imbue your troops with the proper spirit through your actions, not words. They see you working harder than anyone, holding yourself to the highest standard, taking risk with confidence, and making tough decisions. This inspires and binds the group together. In these democratic times, you must practice what you preach. By the spring of 1991, young Curtis Jackson has proved himself to be one of the savviest hustler in the neighborhood. His pool of repeat customers had increased to a point where he had hired his own crew to keep up with their demand. But as he knew, nothing good ever lasts too long in the hood. Just as Curtis was making plan to expand his business, an older hustler named Wayne began to make threatening gestures towards him. Wayne had recently returned to the street from the prison. He was determined to make as much money as fast as possible, then dominate the local drug trade. Curtis, it seems, was his main rival. He tries to intimidate the younger hustler, warning him that they better curtail his operations or pay a price. Curtis ignored him. Then Wayne decided to up the ante and sent out word on the street that he was going to have Curtis killed. Curtis had seen this happen before and he knew what would happen next. Wayne could never do the job himself. He could not risk a return to the prison. Instead, he was banking on the fact that some young kid would hear of his desire to kill Curtis and, eager to gain some street credibility, would take it upon himself to do the dirty work. Sure enough, a few days after hearing of Wayne's intentions, Curtis noticed a young kid named Nitty telling him on the street. He felt certain that Nitty was the one planned to do the hit and it would happen soon. This was the depressing dynamics of hustling in the hood. The more success a hustler had, the more he attracted the wrong kind of attention, unless he inspired some fear and terror. Rivals would keep coming at him, trying to take what he had and continuously threatening his position on the street. Once this started to happen, and then the successful dealers would find himself drawn into a cycle of violence, reprisal, and the time in the pen. There were a few hustlers, however, had showed some manners to rise above this dynamics. In the hood, they were like kings. Just hearing their names or seeing them on the street would elicit a gut reaction, a mix of fright and admiration. What elevated them above others was a series of actions they had taken in the past that demonstrate that they were fearless and smart. Their maneuver would be unpredictable and all the more terrifying for it. If people thought of challenging them, they would quickly remember what these types had done in other circumstances and back off. All of this would give them an aura of power and mystery instead of challenging on all sides, and they would have disciples ready to follow them as far as they wanted. If Curtis saw himself as the kingly type, it would now to show it to the others as dramatically as possible. With death staring him in the face, he worked to control his emotion and thought long and hard about the dilemma that Wayne has posed. If he comes after Wayne's to kill him first, Wayne would be ready and would have the perfect excuse to kill Curtis in his self-defense. If instead he went after Nitty and killed him, the police would catch Curtis and would end up in prison for a long time, an equally fortunate result of Wayne. And if he did nothing, Nitty would finish him off. But Wayne's trait had a fatal flaw. His fear of doing the job with his own hands. He was no king himself, but just another frightened hustler pretending to be tough. Curtis would come after him for an unexpected angle and turn everything around. Without wasting any more time, he asked a member of his crew named Tony to accompany him that afternoon. Together, they surprised Nitty on the street and would, while Tony held him, Curtis slashed the kid in the face with a razor blade. He did it just deep enough to send him screaming to the hospital and leave a nice scar for a whole life. Then a few hours later, he had Tony found Wayne, empty car, and shot it up. An ambiguous a message that meant neither they hoped he was inside or they were taunting him to come out and attack in the open. The following day, the dominoes fell just the Curtis thought they would. Nitty sought out Wayne's, expecting that they would then go together to extract revenge on Curtis. After all, Wayne had been attacked as well. Wayne's, however, still insisted the kid to do alone. Now Nitty could see through the game, and he just passed it to do the dirty work, and Wayne was not enough as he had made himself out to be. Nitty would have nothing more than to do with him, but he was also afraid to take this Curtis by himself. He decided he could live with the scar. Wayne was now in the delicate position. If he asked someone else to do the job, it would start a look like what it was, a man too scared to do himself. Better to let the whole thing just go away. In the days come, the hood was just abuzz with the story of what had happened. Young Curtis had outmaneuvered the outsmart and older rival. Unlike the latter, he was afraid to do the violence himself, and what he has done was bold and dramatic. It was come out of nowhere. Every time people would see Nitty on the street with the long scar of his face, they were reminded of the incident. Rivals would now have to think twice before challenging his status, and he showed was tough and crafty. And those in his crew were duly impressed with his sang-froid and how he had turned the situation around. They now saw him differently and somebody who could last in his jungle and was worth of following. Curtis followed this tip with another similar action, and he had slowly elevated himself above the other hustlers. Now there were young ones who looked up to him and would soon for the core of the devoted bonds of the disciples who would help him in his transition into music. After the success of his first album in 2003, Curtis, now known as 50 Cent, began to realize his dream of forging a business empire. But as this took shape in the months and year to follow, he began to feel that something was wrong. It would be natural to believe that with his current position and fame, those working for him would simply follow his lead and do what he wanted. But his whole life has been lesson in the opposite. People continuously take from you, and they doubt your power and challenge you. In this environment, his executive and managers were not trying to take his money or his life, but rather he had the feeling that they were nibbling away in his power, trying to soften his image and make him more corporate and predictable. If he let this go on, he would lose the only quality that made him different, his propensity to take risk and to do unexpected. He might become a safe investment, but he would no longer be a leader and creative force. In this world, you cannot relax and rest your name, your past achievements, your title. You have to fight, impose your different, and compel people to follow your lead. All those become painfully clear in the summer of 2007. His third album, Curtis, was to be released in September of that year, and everyone seemed to be asleep. The record label Interscope was acting as if the album would sell itself. His management team had put together a market campaign and felt was too tame, passive, and corporate. They were trying to control too much. Then one August afternoon, the employee at G Unit Record, 50's own label within Interscope, told him that a video from the upcoming album somehow just got leaked to the internet. If it spread, it would mess up with carefully orchestrated rollout of the songs and has been planned for the month. 50 was first to hear of this, and after contemplating what to do next, he decided it was finally time to shake up the dynamics and to the unpredictable and play the part of the hustler king. He called into the office's radio internet team at G Unit instead of working on contain the viral spread of the video. The usual response to such problem was management would advocate in order to spuriously leak it out other side and let it spread like wildfire. On the top of this move, they created a following story of tell journalists for public consumption. When 50 heard of the leak, he flew into the wild rage. He threw his phone at the window, and such force he cracked. He tore the plasma TV of the wall and smashed it into pieces. He left the building in the fit, and last thing they heard him yelling that he was shutting it down, all going on vacation. That evening, on 50 orders, they had maintained the man for the building take picture of the damage, all fake for his purpose, and then leaked the photo of the internet. They were to keep all this secret. Not even management was to know this drama was completely manufactured. In the days to come, 50 watched with satisfaction as the story spread everywhere. Interscope was awakened for his slumber. Management was sent to the message, and he saw now command if he refused to do anything more publicity. And he had threatened. Their whole campaign was doomed, and they had to follow his lead and let him set tone over the publicity, which means something more aggressive and fluid. Among 50 executives and employees, a word spread quickly for what had supposed happen, and his reputation for being unpredictable and violent brought to life. When they saw him in the office, they felt a twinge of fear. Better to pay attention to what he wanted than risk witnessing his anger. And for the public, this was just the kind of story they expected for the thug rapper. It compelled their attention, and they would laugh at his out of control antic and realize that it was 50 depicting the drama who would have last laugh. When I reached to the top in the business, I adjusted to my new position. I became bolder and crazier than before, and I listened even less to people who tried to slow me down. Throughout history, we have witnessed the following pattern. Certain people stand out from one crowd because of some special skill and talent, and then perhaps they are masters at their political game, knowing how to charm and win the proper allies, and maybe they have superior technological knowledge in their field, or maybe they are one who initiates some bold venture and success. In any event, these types suddenly find themselves in leadership positions, something of which their past experience and education had not prepared them. Now they are alone on the top, and their every decision and action scrutinized by the group and the public. The pressure can be intense, and what inevitably happens is that of the many of the unconsciously come to all kind of fear. Whereas before they might have been bold and creative, now they grew cautious and conservative, aware of the heightened stakes, secrets of being held accountable for the success of the group, and they over delegate, pull everyone of their opinion and refrain. On they become excessively dictatorial, trying to control everything, another sign of weakness and insecurity. It is the story of great senator who make who make lousy president, a bold lieutenant, and turn into the mediocre general, or top level managers who become incompetent executives. And yet among the group that they are inevitably a few or demonstrate the opposite. They rise to the position, displaying extraordinary leadership skills, and no one had suspected were in them. We find in this group people like Napoleon Bonaparte, Mahatma Gandhi, Winston Churchill. What kind these people together is not some mysterious skill or bit of knowledge, but rather a quality of character, a temperament that reveals the essence of the art. They are fearless, they do not shrink from the making the hard decisions by themselves. Instead, they to relish such responsibility. They do not suddenly become more conservative, but in fact show a propensity for bold action. They exhibit tremendous grace under fire. Such type comes to understand in various ways that the leader has a unique power that generally goes untapped. Any group tend to assume the spirit of energy and person on the top. If the person is weak and passive, then group tend to splinter into fiction. If such leader lack confidence, their insecurities tend to filter their way down the line, and their nervous, fretful moods put everyone on edge. But there is always the opposite possibility, a leader who is audacious, out in front, and setting the tone and agenda for the group, spark a higher energy level and confidence. Such a person on top does not need to yell or push people around. Those below want to follow his or her leader, such because it's strong and inspiring. In war, where leadership skills are more immediately apparent and necessary because lives are at risk, and we can distinguish two leadership style from behind or front and from the front, and from type of general like to stay in his tent or headquarters and bark out leaders feeling that having such distance make it easier to command. This style can also mean involving lieutenant and other generals in important decisions, choosing to lead by committee. In both these cases, commander is trying to hide himself from scrutiny, accountability, and danger. The greatest general in history, however, are invariably those who lead to the front and by themselves. They can see by the troops or at the head of the army, exposing themselves to the same fate and any foot soldier. The Duke of Wellington said that the mere appearance of Napoleon Bonaparte at the head of his army translated into the equivalent of an additional 40,000 men, a kind of electrical charge passed through the troops. He is sharing in his sacrifices, leading by example. It has almost religious connotations. And I repeat again, the Duke of Wellington said that mere appearance of Napoleon Bonaparte at the head of his army translated into the equivalent of an additional 40,000 men, a kind of electrical charge passed through the troops, is sharing in their sacrifice, leading by example. It has almost religious connotations. We notice the same two style in the business and politics as well. The executive who lead from the behind will always try to distinguish its virtue, the need of the secrecy, and the desire to be more fair and democratic. But it's really stem for fear, and it invariably lead to the lack of respect from those below. The opposite style, leading from the front and by example at the same power in the office and it does on the battlefield. Leader who work harder and everywhere else or practice what they preach and are not afraid to be accountable for tough decisions or take risks will find that they have created a well of the respect, and they will pay greater dividends down the road. They can ask for sacrifice, punish troublemakers, and make occasional mistakes, all without facing the usual grumble and doubts, and they don't have yet yell, complain, and force their man and woman to follow. People do so willingly. In urban environments such as South Side Queen, respect is an extremely important issue. In other place, your background, education, resume might lend you some authority and credibility, but not in the hood. There, everyone starts with a zero to gain respect from your peers, and you must repeatedly prove yourself. People are constantly prone to doubting about your abilities and your power. You must show again and again that have it taken and thrive to the last. Big words and promises mean nothing, only actions carry weight. If you are authentic as though you seem to be, then will earn the respect and will make people back off and make your life that much easier. This should be your perspective as well. You start with nothing in this world. Any title, money, and privilege you inherit are actually hindrance. They delude you in the believing and you are on respect. You continue to impose your own will because of such privilege. People will come to disdain and despise you. Instead, only your actions can prove your worth. They tell people that you are who you are. You must imagine that you are continuously being challenged to show and you deserve the position you occupy. In the cultural full of fake and hype, you will stand out and some authentic and worthy of the respect. The greatest leaders in the history of all inevitable learned experiences and following lessons. It's much better to be feared and respected than to be loved. As a prime example, look at the film director John Ford, the man behind some of the greatest films in the Hollywood history. The task of film direction can be practically difficult. They have to deal with the large crew, actors with their delicate egos, and dictatorial producers who want to meddle every step of the way, and all the whole while being under extreme time limit with a large amount of money at stake. This tendency for directors is to give around ground on these various battlefields to placate and cajole the actors and let the producer have their way here and there to gain some cooperation by being pleasant and likable. Ford was by nature a sensitive and empathetic man, but he learned that if he revealed this side of his personality, he quickly lost control over the final product. The actor and producer would begin to assert themselves and the film would lose any sense of cohesion. He noticed that the notoriously nice directors never really last very long and they were pushed around and the films were blousy. Earlier in his career, he decided that he would have to forge a kind of mask for himself, and that man was implicable and even a bit of frightening. On the set, he made it clear that he was not the usual prime donna director who would work longer hours than anyone. If they were filming on some location with harsh conditions, he would sleep in a tent like everyone else and share their bad food. On occasion, he would just get into violent fist fight on the set, and most often his leading actors such as John Wayne. These fights were not for the show, and they were bruised and engaged in them with all the strength, making the actor fight back with equal force. This would set tone, and actor would tend to feel embarrassed by engaging in his usual pissy behavior and ego tantrums. Everyone was threatened the same, even the Archduke of the Austria, trying to carve out a career as a Hollywood actor, was yielded at the pushed into the ditch by Ford himself. He had a unique way of directing actors. He would say only a few well chosen words about what he wanted from them. Then, if they did the wrong things or said, he would brutally humiliate them in front of everyone. They quickly learned they had to pay attention to the few words spoken to this body language and set, which would often tell more. Then they had a raised level of concentration and bring even more of themselves into the part. Once then famous producer Samuel Goldwyn visited the set, he told Ford he just wanted to watch him work, a producer way of spying and applying pressure. Ford didn't say a word. The next day, however, he visited Golden Wayne in his office and just sat silently in the chair by Golden Wayne's desk, glaring at him. After the while, Golden, exasperated, asked him what he was doing. He just wanted to watch Golden Wayne's, and Ford answered. Gold Wayne never visited him again. At the set, quickly learned to give him his space. All of us had a strange and paradoxical effect on the cast and crew. They came to love working for John Ford and would die to gain the place among his exclusive team of return staff. His standards were so high, it forced them to work harder, and he made them superior actors and technicians. An occasional nice gesture or compliment in his part carried double the weight and would be remembered for a lifetime. The end result of his tough and unforgiving manner was that he managed to maintain a high degree of control over the final product, and most of our directors and films were consistently of the highest quality. Nobody dared to challenge his authority, and his last Hollywood and was the king of the Western and action films for well over 40 years, and unprecedented achievements in the industry. Understand, to be a leader often require making tough choices, getting people to do things again their will, and if you have chosen the soft, pleasant, complain style of leadership, out of fear of being disliked, you will find yourself with less and less room to compel people to work hard and make sacrifice. If you suddenly try to be tough, they would often feel wounded and personally upset. They can move from love to hate. The opposite approach yield the opposite result. If you build a reputation for toughness and getting result, people might resent you, but you will establish a foundation of respect. You are demonstrating genuine qualities of leadership and speak to everyone. Now, with time and well founded authority, you have room to back off and reward people, even to be nice. When you do so, it will be seen as a genuine gesture and not an attempt to get people to like you, and it will have double the effect.